Welcome, friends, to the Soul Talk podcast, a show where we explore and uncover the path to the heart, amplifying your conscience. Join me as we meet incredible souls who are in this journey and learn from their experience and different methods that will make you vibrate your heart. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. This is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love, and we're in Soul Talk. And today we have a close friend of mine that I have the pleasure to meet in person in Miami. And we even stayed together over there. So we really got to know each other. And she's an amazing human being and very resilient. Her story is very powerful. And I wish more people get to know her and get the help that she can bring you. And not only that, the change that we all have. So just before she tells you a little bit more about about her, she have come from a trajectory of addiction recovery. And now she become a public speaker, writer, published writer, the best-selling author, and so forth. And she is a really an amazing human being that I have the honor to know in person. Abby, thank you for accepting Soul Talk, to be in Soul Talk.
I'm so excited to be here with you, and I just adore you and everything that you're about. So I know that today's talk is going to be very, very juicy because we have a lot of similarities in our stories.
Yes. Tell us a little bit how your story, how you become the person that you're now.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a second generation Latina Canadian. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada currently. My parents are from El Salvador. They immigrated from El Salvador to Canada in the mid 80s, so 1985, 86, I believe it was. During that time, there was civil wars going on in Central America, very violent civil wars happening there. And my dad was in the military. He was a soldier from the age of 14 to the time he left, which was, I think, 21 or so. So in that time, he experienced a lot. He saw a lot. And we'll get into that because our topic today is going to be around breaking the chains, the generational chains of trauma and abuse and addiction and all of that stuff. But just kind of a little bit about me and what ended up happening with me. So I was born in Mexico on the way to Canada. And my mom was about 8 months pregnant and they had to do a bunch of paperwork. So we ended up having to lay over there, and then I ended up being born there. And so when I was about 6 months old, we moved to Canada and started our new life here, not having very much support. My mom left all of her family back home, her mom, her siblings, everybody. And we did have some family, extended family from my dad's side, and but we weren't really close with them. So we started our life here, and unfortunately, due to some of the trauma and just generationally, the things that my dad had experienced, he really turned to alcohol quite early on. When we landed here in Canada. And because of that, we grew up in a very volatile situation. A lot of he became a very violent alcoholic. And my sisters and I were so I have two sisters, younger sisters. We were the brunt of the violence and the abuse. And we ended up having to deal with a lot of abuse in all forms: physical, mental, emotional, sexual, all sorts of abuse. We were put in very, very difficult situations as children that we shouldn't have been in, with people that we shouldn't have been in with. And because of that, we were exposed to all of those abuses. And so as a child, especially from the culture that we come from, where we don't talk about these things to anyone. We don't share what's going on at home. It's very much stays at home. You're not really taught how to process it all. And mind you, my mom was 17 at the time when she had me. She was very young. Again, uprooting from her home country and leaving everybody behind. she was dealing with her own, trauma, and discovering that the man that she had married was an alcoholic, and, having 3 children, consecutively, and little support. So it was just a really unfortunate situation, for us kids. But as kids, I just distinctly remember trying to make sense of it all. I knew it wasn't normal what was happening at home, but I just didn't know any better, and I didn't know what to do about it, who to turn to. So we become very, like, just children are very resourceful, and we make up our own ways to cope. And usually, because we're children, it's not really the healthiest ways of coping. And so I turned to quite a bit of things in my early childhood, really struggled with depression and anxiety quite a bit. And I can remember asking my mom as early as like 8 or 9 years old, why do I always feel so sad? Why do I always feel this way? And, she just gave me the best answer that she could give me at that time. And she just said, like, just try not to think about it. It'll go away. Just don't think about it. And I was, as if it was that easy, and
Yeah.
I really tried to forget. I tried to not think about these things, but of course I'm dealing with it every single day.
How funny it is, because
Mhm.
just in the old ways was do not think about depression or how sad you are and so forth, and all the problems that you have, and it will
Mhm.
go away. It never did.
No,
And it just passed to generation to generation and to
exactly.
generation until this
Exactly.
day.
Exactly.
And it's up to us to change that or
Exactly.
continue the same trauma to our kids and grandkids and so on.
Exactly. Well,
So
even with my dad, for example, I'll just use his experience, because both lineages, there's a lot of trauma on both sides. But just specifically kind of focusing on my dad, I don't know very much about my great grandparents and anything further beyond that, but I do know that my grandpa, his dad, also struggled with addiction, also struggled with alcohol. And when he was in the war,
mm,
some really horrible things ended up happening, where he ended up going missing, and they ended up not finding him, ever. And my dad was 14 when that happened, and the way that his uncles kind of helped him to cope with it was just gave him alcohol. They just said, here, take this will make it all better, this will make it all go away. And so then there goes it being passed down, right, where the uncles were already, abusing alcohol to deal with their own, or not deal with their own traumas and pains and heartaches. And then they just passed it down to my dad, who then, passed it down to me, which is part of my story, which we'll get into.
oh, unfortunately, there is this mindset that alcohol is going to make you forgive the problems. When it's exactly the contrary. It's going
Exactly.
to remind you the problems that you actually have, and in
Exactly.
a amplified way. It is going to
Mhm.
create more depression and more sadness, and you're going
Mhm.
to drink more. So it becomes a cycle.
Exactly.
It becomes a
Exactly.
cycle.
And so, like I said, as a child, just trying to make sense of the world around me, not having any resources, not having any role models, no one to really look up to say, wow, I really relate to that person. I look at them, they've gone through what I've gone through, and look where they're at. I didn't have any of that in my life. And so, like I said, I really just did the best that I could, as a child. And then, in my teen years, I got involved with, just the cool kids in school, and the kind of the rebels, and the ones we'd all skip school and hang out together and all that kind of stuff. And then at age 15, I was introduced to alcohol myself. And, it's interesting because, like, you think about, I grew up all my life watching what alcohol did to my dad and those around me. But I like with him, like, obviously he never offered it to me or anything like that. And I wasn't really ever curious, but when I'm with my peers and with the, like, my friends, it's like fun, and everybody's just like enjoying themselves. It's like a good time. And so I drank that first time when I was 15. And I believe it really hit me much more different than it did everyone that I was with that night. Because for me, what I remember from the night, because I blacked out, I ended up blacking out from drinking that night. I just remember the next morning waking up thinking, wow, for that one night, I didn't have to think or feel anything. I didn't have to worry about my childhood. I didn't have any of that. It really numbs me for that night. So I just really looked at it from that day forward as a medication, where it was like I was in so much pain that I just like would take this medication and it would alleviate it. But as you shared, it's temporary because
Not,
when, yeah.
not only that, you might not remember what you just did the night before. And then it's like, oh, I felt great. And the night before, I didn't remember. But while you were intoxicated, you will remember everything.
Exactly,
That is
exactly.
the difference. And you don't remember that, you will remember.
Exactly, exactly. It's wild. It's wild. And and that was like it was instant for me. It was really an instant addiction for me. It was always chasing that numbness. And of course, from age 15 to the time that I gave up alcohol, which was 8.5 years ago, was almost 15 years that I drank very heavily during that time. And during that time, not only then was I running away from my childhood trauma, I was then running away from my present trauma that I was also creating in alcoholism. Because when you're intoxicated like that consistently, you're going to get yourself in trouble. I got myself in many, many horrific situations where now when I look back and I think back to it, I'm like, wow, it really is a miracle that I'm alive, because I was put in such dangerous situations, just a young girl, and in these really scary places. I have stories for days around that time of my life that is just, it's terrifying. But thankfully, and for the reason that God only knows, I was safe. I was safe all throughout that time. I didn't, and then I ended up getting in trouble with the law. And like, that was kind of like the first time was like not a big deal. The second time was a wake up call. It was like a really big sign for me that it was time to make some changes. And so I just kind of came to a crossroads, and right before on the cusp of my 30th birthday, where I made the decision that I needed to give up alcohol. It was killing me. It was really, really killing me. I was in a cycle where in the midst of drinking like this, and because it's so societally accepted, because it's very social, everyone gets together. No, it's not one of those things where people notice right away that it's a big issue for somebody. And to be honest, the people that I was drinking with at that time, we all drank the same. We all drank very heavily. We all, like, most of us blacked out, all that kind of stuff, right? So it wasn't like I really stood out from them, but I knew inside my motive and intention and how I was feeling the next morning when I was waking up.
When what emotions I don't want to know the situation, but
Mhm.
what emotions it actually make you choose to make that change? You
Mhm.
remember that emotion
Yeah.
was?
Um, it was fear. I had a lot of fear. So I'll share the story around the kind of that breakthrough for me, because it's very important. So it was the summer of 2014. On the outside looking in, everything looked amazing. I actually ended up going to nursing school. I graduated, became a nurse. I climbed, in my nursing profession, pretty quickly. I got married to the love of my life, who I'm still married to. We've been together for 15 years, like a very long time. And he was very normal. he was not the typical type of person that I had attracted in my previous kind of life. And yeah, so like we had a home, we were traveling all the time. Everything looked wonderful. It wasn't like I was one of those alcoholics that were under a bridge that people envision, like everything looked very normal, but it wasn't. I was in a very desperate state, where I literally would think about it every day. Like I'd be at work, all I could think about was like, when I get home, I'm going to pour myself that glass of like hard liquor that I have in the freezer, and that will continue my evening. And then that was like the cycle. It was like every single day. I was a daily drinker, so it was pretty severe. And then I ended up going out one weekend, and just overdid it. And then I woke up the next morning, and the first thing I did was go look outside the window to see where my car was, because I knew I had driven the night before. And, it was there, and I was like, okay, like the car's there. And then I was
Mm.
just retracing my steps of what happened the night before and all that kind of stuff. And there was just this horrific sense of dread that I felt, where it was just like, just dread and fear. And I thought to myself, thank goodness that I didn't hurt myself and I didn't hurt somebody else. But I know that I'm playing with fire. I know that this isn't going to last forever, and that eventually something very serious is going to happen that I'm not going to be able to come back out of. And so there was just this dread. And for the first time in many, many years, because I've always been a spiritual person in the sense that I believed in something bigger than me. I've always believed in God. That's what it looks like for me. But I disconnected myself from everyone and anything during that time of heavy drinking. I was really disconnected. More importantly than anyone else, I was disconnected from myself. And of course, how could I be connected to anything bigger than me if I'm not even connected to myself? And so, for the first time in so many years, I really got down to my knees and I just prayed. I didn't know what else to do, and I
It
prayed, and I.
was it was not a resentment for everything that you have passed. I'm asking you these questions because in the time I was alcoholic when I was 21,
Mhm.
that we have talked in person
Yeah.
about that. When I was 21, I remember there was a big, big resentment against God. That
Mm-hmm.
why you had let me pass all these things and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was drinking, because I did not care about the judgment in that time of
Mm-hmm.
God towards me.
Yeah.
And it was a resentment to him.
Mm-hmm.
And when I actually pray in that time, like you're mentioning, and I actually start making peace with that resentment that I had towards him,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I actually start making the choice
Mm-hmm.
to actually stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at my kids and like, oh my God, I'm a mom and I can't, I am the only example they're going to have. So I stopped drinking.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't happen something like that because it was a resentment because you had passed through hell with your dad growing up.
Yeah. I think the biggest resentment I had was against him, to be honest, against my dad. Um, God for me, I like growing up, because we had kind of different, we were raised in different kind of beliefs, you and I, I knew of God, and the God that I knew of was like a loving God. It wasn't really a punishing God. It was like a comforting God. And when I kind of went down this path of like addiction and just like, drugs even, and all that kind of stuff, I chose to disconnect myself because I felt ashamed, and I didn't feel worthy of his protection, of his love, of his acknowledgement. I just went on my own way and just really just cut all ties and disconnected myself from that. But in the back of my mind, I always knew there was something there, because like I said, there were so many things that happened to me during that time that I was drinking, where there had to have been an angel, a God that really protected me, because if it wouldn't have been, I really should have ended up, on the news where, they found my body in a ditch somewhere or something like that. Like, it was that serious. Um, and so when I kind of brought me to my knees, and I cried out to him, and I just said, like, help me. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I know I need to change. And that was the first time I finally admitted that, that there was a problem, and I needed help, and I couldn't do it myself. And so, a funny story around that is that, years later, like years earlier, I think about 5 years before that situation happened, when I had my first impaired driving charge, I was court mandated to go see a doctor. And this doctor specialized in addictions. And I went to go see him, and we had a conversation. And he just said, like, have you ever considered, that you have a problem with alcohol? And I laughed at him. I was like, no. I'm like, it's for fun, like sometimes we like go overboard, I kind of laughed at him. And then he's like, there's a lot of resources out there for people who have problems, who struggle with alcohol and other forms of drugs. And I really dismissed him. I didn't pay any attention to it. I didn't think it related to me. But those years later, I remember that doctor saying that there were resources, that there were places that I could go to. And so that was like a seed that was planted in me. And so that started my journey of healing, really, at that point in time, where I just started to go on a mission and look for anything and everything that could help me. It landed me in so many different places. Some things worked, some things didn't. I just was willing to try it all, because I had no choice. I had no other choices. And through that, now it's been 8.5 years later. And that was before I became a mom. And, this is why I'm so passionate about this, because I want to share with you a couple of things that have been incredible gifts for me in motherhood now, and in knowing in my journey that I am now like alcohol free for 8.5 years. I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I had 3 babies back to back. They've never seen me drink. They have never experienced like violence, any of that stuff. Like, I look at my daughter who's 4, and at her age, I had already seen and experienced so many things. And I just look at her, and sometimes makes me very emotional, because I just look at her innocence and her beauty and her, just her curiosity and excitement for life. And I just think, like, I see myself in her, and I just like, but I can't relate. I see myself in her, but I also know that my experience was so much more, it was so different. And so, because of the work that I've done and the journey that I've been on, just with the healing and just, and it continues, as it's a lifelong journey. It will never be complete. There's always going to be things that are going to come up that we're going to have to learn to work through. It's just, the only difference is that I don't have alcohol as a choice for me anymore. It's not something that I turn to numb, or when it gets uncomfortable, to take the edge off, or anything like that. And there was a really beautiful thing that happened. Like, this is a couple of months ago with my daughter. So she's very intelligent, like really sassy, and just really, really playful and fun. But we talk about our feelings at home. And I'm very conscious and mindful of when I'm experiencing, because the trauma runs deep. It's my default setting. When, like, very, very reactive, because that's what I was brought up in, right? Where everything was very reaction, like, my dad was very reactive around things. And so I became that way as well, because it was all I saw around me, right? There was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of, like, just chaos, a lot of chaos. And I've had to do a lot of work, and I continue to do a lot of work, that when those feelings arise in me, where I get overwhelmed or anxious, in motherhood, especially 3 under 4, like, it's crazy. And so it tests you. There's times when I'm not perfect, right? And I will yell, or whatever it is, right? But the big difference is that I'm very quick to admit when I've been wrong. And even with my children, as little as they are, I will get to their level once, the moment has passed and everybody's more calm. I get to their level and I explain to them, like, mommy was feeling very overwhelmed, and I name the feelings, right? And I process it with them, and I say, like, I'm trying my best to do better. I promise I'll do better. And we'll have a healthy conversation about it. And so it's gotten now to the point where my daughter calls me out. And so, like, I will do something, and she'll know when it's, like, not my best self. And the other day, and she's very smart, so she'll wait until the moment, kind of, as the heat of the moment has passed, and then she'll be like, Mom, I didn't like how you talked to me earlier. And then I'll look at her, and then, and I just kind of get to her level, and I say, let's talk about it, and then she'll, and then we end up having, like, a beautiful conversation around what happened. And I thank her. I'm like, thank you for letting me know that you didn't like that. And, I'm going to do better, and all that kind of stuff. And I think, when in my life would that have ever happened, when in my childhood? There was no explanation. Like, when my dad would fly off the handle, we just made sense of it in our head. And as kids, we very much internalize everything. Everything is our fault. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I deserve it. Like, all that stuff starts happening as a child, to try to make sense of it. Right. So there was no explanation. There was never an apology, any of that. Right. And so that, to me, is a big win. And that, to me, shows that I am doing the work in breaking the generational chains, because first and foremost, they will never have to experience an alcoholic mom, that's in active addiction. And second of all, they'll be able to name when things are happening and call things out as they are, and feel safe enough to do that.
Something that I've been observing more and more, we're really in a new timeline. as human beings, because we can observe the old generation, our parents, grandparents, etc., uncles, and all that generation. And then in that generation, it was the kids should be seen but not heard.
Yes,
The
exactly.
kids should not be expressing emotions. No one should express the emotions. Everybody, the male is the provider, the woman
Yeah.
is one, and more in the Latino community
Yeah.
where we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
It was everybody has their gender works to do,
Yeah.
and none of them it was involved about emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
no one actually really talked, not even between husbands and wives. They don't
Exactly.
even talk about their emotions,
Mm-hmm.
that they were having problems with the kids, or they were overwhelmed with the kids, or the
Mm-hmm.
husband did not create enough money to pay all the bills,
Yeah.
and they would not even communicate those kind of things. So it was easier to numb it down in
Mm-hmm.
whatever level they can,
Exactly.
to drugs, to alcohol, or depression, or
Mm-hmm.
sadness, or many things
Promiscuity,
that they
all
went
that.
through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the new generations that we are raising now, we
Mm-hmm.
can say that our kids now, they can talk about their emotions,
Mm-hmm.
because they are very different, the new generations that we are raising
Yeah.
the new world. That's why I
Yeah.
say it is a new timeline.
Yeah.
Because, in many levels, it
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the same future that we had,
Yeah.
because we are actually now, we talk with our husbands, we talk with our mates, or our mates are secure also to talk with us.
Mm-hmm.
We are now, it is acceptable
Mm-hmm.
that your best friend, it is your mate.
Mm-hmm.
And the old generations, they were just husband and wife.
Yeah.
They were not about best friends. That
Exactly.
was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really alone, living
Mm-hmm.
with someone that it was they don't even know.
Yeah.
So it was really a different time for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And breaking that generation traumas, and breaking those programming, how life, or husband and wife, or how the kids should be seen and heard,
Mm-hmm.
it is breaking the whole mold
Mm-hmm.
for the future for all our planet Earth.
Yeah, I love that. And I just so love that because I can't go like this is what I think to myself now. It's like I can't go back in time and change anything that happened to me. It happened to me. But there's a quote that says that it's not about the trauma that happened to you, it's how you deal with the trauma that really defines you. And as a child I had no tools, I had no resources, so I give myself the grace and the care and the compassion, knowing that I just didn't know any better. I didn't know any better, and I didn't have any guidance, like you said. Like my mom didn't even know like how to process her own stuff that she was witnessing and experiencing and talking about it. And my dad, let alone. And it's interesting that you talked about how when we're drunk, or like when we're drinking, how we still feel those emotions. It was so confusing for me as a child when my dad, because like he used to drink till like the early hours of the night, and he would call out to us at like 2 in the morning, and we'd be sleeping, and he'd call out to us, and then we'd get up and we go to the kitchen, and he'd get us to sit on his lap, and he would just start weeping. He would just start weeping and talking about things that we didn't understand. We were young kids, like we were small girls, and you could just sense the pain that he was in. And of course the next morning he wouldn't remember any of that. But like, for me it was just so confusing, because it was like I'm very empathetic, and I've always been very deeply empathetic since I was a child. And it would really hurt me to see him that way, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand, like, what was going on. I just knew that he was sad. And then, the next day when he would be like dry, like what wouldn't even say sober, like he would just be dry. He'd be like violent and angry, and just, and it was just this like two worlds of like, pain and sadness, and like deep, like, just this darkness. And then, there'd be violence and like yelling and all that kind of stuff, right? So it was just very chaotic, very crazy. And that's I can very much envision myself now. Like, first of all, I don't even think I would have had children, to be honest, if I wouldn't have overcome what I've overcome. It wasn't something that I was really excited or looking forward to be honest. My husband waited 10 years for us to have children together. you know But now it's such a gift. It's such a gift. And like, you know, my children see me cry, they see me overwhelmed, they see me, and then I explain to them. I'm like, you know, like, because they'll be like, what's going on? And they feel safe enough to approach me, and they ask me, you know, like, what's happening, mom? And I'll be like, you know, and I'll explain to them how it in ways that I think that they can, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old can understand, right? But there's no mystery there. There's no in their head where they're trying to like make sense of it and be like, why is mommy sad and crying? And like the next minute she's like violent and angry and all that kind of stuff, right? Like it's just, it's such a night and day. But I do have infinite compassion and empathy, even to my dad. You know, I don't have a relationship with him in this day and age. Personally, it's just a personal decision that I've made, but I deeply have compassion for him, because I know what from the amount that I know that he's been through. He was also a young boy with no guidance, with no, you know, at one time he was a young child who witnessed, and the stories, like I'm telling you, like that could be, it'll be a novella one day, like, you know. But I also understand that he also has a responsibility to do something about it, just like I did. You know, like I let go of that victim mentality and that victimhood that I was so much enthralled in when I was in active addiction, where I thought if you had my life, you would be drinking the way I did, you know. And that was a crutch that I really held on to, that it was like an excuse, it justified it, that it was like, you have no idea what I've been through, this is like how I deal with it, so don't judge it, type of thing, right? But now it's like, no, I have a responsibility. Like, I am not defined by these things that happen to me. There are resources, there are help. I just have to do the effort, make the effort, and do it. And the ones that end up benefiting from that are our children, you know, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions.
Hi everyone, this is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love. And if you have been feeling stuck where you are right now, or if you have felt that you cannot connect with others in the same language or the same emotions that you're feeling, if you're a coach, a healer, energy worker in any of those branches, maybe this is for you. Because we have felt the disconnection for the rest of our family, friends, that we cannot connect to them. And we're so afraid to actually go deep dive when we're getting triggered by our own clients, because we're seeing our mirror image with them. My name is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love, and that's my spiritual name. And I take clients from feeling confused and feeling stuck to feeling free, to feeling that they feel empowered from themselves. I created a system, Path to the Heart, that goes in 3 levels. And the first level, it is healing the inner child, healing the parts of us that we've been so afraid, or it's very painful to do it. I have done it myself, not only with me, and I have done it with many of my clients, that I take them to this process. The second level, it is to go more into inner self, clearing the family lineage, to breaking the contracts and vows, learning deeper more about the laws of the universe. And the third level, it is learning how to channel, how to do waking up your and getting online your gifts, your unique gifts that the world so much needs right now. So if you wanted to know more about this, I am eager to show you and to teach you all what I know that I use every day in my life. So thank you for being here in this page. I really appreciate it. And this is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love. And something that I observe every time you go to a party and someone gets drunk and whatever, I don't drink much. I'm not never, I cannot say I never drink. Not once in a while I drink 1 or 2, but I like to observe people. That's something that I am fascinated, because I learn a lot every time I observe people. And one of a few days ago, I was in a carne asada over here with some friends, and 2 sisters got kind of drunk. And everything from the past, from the childhood, that you took my toy, it show up, it was like, oh my God, I was so observant and like, okay, maybe I should intervene. So I am fine. And it was like, okay, let's take a big breath, but no. And it show up again, all that anger from childhood. And that's what something the alcohol would do.
Yes.
It would not calm you down. It would not bring you down. It would not make you have empathy for the other person. It make you be selfish
Exactly.
and narcissist in that moment. Even if you're not narcissist, you will show signs of narcissism when you're in alcohol. Absolutely. More than anything else. And that came to and I came to understand, because the other one was trying to change the other one, and the other one was trying to change the other one. It's like, this is very interesting, because none of them was taking responsibility of their own actions or have empathy and compassion for the other one. And that's just a typical scenario from someone that is drinking and is in pain.
Yes.
Exactly. And that happens all the time with every single person that drinks. And we cannot change anyone, not sober or drunk or in any situation. We're only responsible for ourselves. That's something that now we all the majority understand, at least if you're not an alcohol. Yeah. That you understand that. But why is still legal? Why is still legal the alcohol and many other drugs that are not going to put you in that state are not legal? That's something that I do not understand yet. Yeah. Why it is legal in all the world, alcohol, when it creates the same problems, the same patterns that we have lived for since before the Greeks and Romans. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I mean, we really do live in a very medicated society. Like whether it's alcohol, whether it's drug, whether it's prescription medications, so many people are just medicating themselves for not having the willingness to face the things that they need the medication for, the root problem, right? Because like with anything, for example, if I break my arm today and I'm in excruciating pain and I take some, morphine or something to like numb the pain, it'll make me feel better, but the break is still there. The bone is still broken. And until I actually go and like see a doctor and get a scan and get it taped up and go through like all of that process of like healing it, I can take that medication every day, but that broken bone is still going to be there. And that's the same thing with any sort of medication that we take, whether it's like I said, I refer to alcohol as a medication because it really did medicate me for that very temporarily, but that brokenness was still very much there. And until I finally let go of that and decided to look at it, then the healing began. But there's people that they go to the grave with all of that stuff, right? And it's so unfortunate. It's so sad to know that what could have been, but they didn't make the decision to for whatever reason, because like you said, no one can make anybody change. I've learned that the hard way. In many relationships in my life, I can only change myself. And I know how difficult that is, so let alone trying to change somebody else, right? It really has to come from a place of deep willingness and responsibility that somebody takes for their own life, right? And it's one of those life lessons that are very painful.
How do you consider that we can change the trauma that it goes in generations by generations, and it will affect our kids? But what are the basic steps that you will give an advice to someone that is creating this trauma for themselves and for others?
I think, the first and foremost step, I believe, is the acknowledgement and the awareness of the trauma, because we cannot heal what we don't acknowledge. If we pretend it never happened or we leave things out, you're not fully validating it. And this is especially true of childhood trauma. Childhood trauma is very, especially when it happens in those earlier years, like the formidable years, where our subconscious is being developed and formed. It's very deeply rooted, right? Like we can I have certain feelings that come up for me sometimes that are familiar, but I just can't pinpoint what it, but I remember it. I remember, like, my body remembers this feeling, even though I don't remember the memory specific to that feeling or emotion. It's so deeply ingrained in us. It's like genetic. It's like, the whole topic of epigenetics and like the environment around how it affects our DNA and it gets passed down, all of that kind of stuff, right? I think the first thing is to really just face it and acknowledge the things that we are running away from, the traumas. And that has been the premise of my journey for the past 8.5 years, where I've been peeling back the layers of trauma, and the layers of memories and the things, and just really acknowledging. And I think a big piece of my own personal healing has been my inner child work that I've done. That has been and continues to be the most important work for me. And because that little me that experienced all those things is still in me. She's still in there. It's just that my physical body has now, is a different age, but she's very much still in there. And I've really learned to connect with her, speak to her, and validate, everything that she's gone through, that she went through, that she experienced, and saying, like, I know that you went through this. I believe you. I'm here for you, all that kind of stuff. Like, I've done like a lot of powerful, like, inner child work around that. So I think that's the first thing. And, and the second thing would be definitely resources, where we cannot become ourselves by ourselves. We need to reach out for help. Whether it looks like programs, therapy, I'm a big believer in professional help. There's people who do their work for a reason, and seeking their professional advice and their help through this kind of difficult journey. Because it's not an easy journey. It's very uncomfortable. We have to have supports. We have to have that safety net to really hold us when we fall, because we will fall. We'll fall many times on this journey. And I feel like I've turned my pain into purpose, because now I speak about it, I write about it, I blog about it. I actually go into facilities and I speak to children who are some of them, like one recent one that I do is I go into detention centers for youth who are in there for, committing crimes at a young age. And I went a few weeks ago, and at the end we had an opportunity to do a Q&A, and I asked them, by a show of hands, how many of you come from abusive homes or homes with addiction? Every single one of them put their hand up, every single one. And one boy even spoke up and said, my dad died of fentanyl overdose 2 months ago. And it's just like, it's so heartbreaking for me, because I know what they've been through, where they've, like, I spoke about earlier how I didn't have a role model in my young life. Now I feel responsible to be that role model, to these kids, to my children, to whoever can relate to my story, just to say that there is hope. You can overcome. It's not easy, but it is possible. It's very possible, and now the more I spoke up about these things, the more I acknowledged them and felt, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, really sat in the pain of it all, because that's something that I had never done. So really sat in the pain of it all. And then, because the only way through is through. So, like, I had to go through it all, right? And then the more less power and control it had over me, where before it had so much power and control in me because there was so much shame and secrecy around it. Now it's almost like I've let go of that cloak of shame and secrecy. And it's just like, this is a fact. This is what happened to me. I'm not ashamed of it. Don't feel sorry for me. This is what I'm doing about it now, and so I believe that every single person has a beautiful story to tell about their life experience. And there's people out there that only you can touch. Only you can touch with your personal experience. But the only way that you're able to touch that person is by you speaking about it and acknowledging the stuff that has happened to you, right? And doing something with it, right? And not everyone chooses that path, but I think it's so important, like, to be out, like, a public speaker about it and writing about it and all that kind of stuff. That's a little bit, on the extreme level, in terms of, like, I understand that not everyone's going to do that, but at least, give yourself the gift of recovery, and go through the work, to acknowledge the little you that's stuck in you, that is just wanting and wishing to be validated and acknowledged. you know, and to be given a voice, because like you shared earlier too, as children, we were seen, not heard. We didn't have a voice. We never spoke up. You know, I never spoke up. And now, you know, that little me does speak up on public stages, you know. So yeah, just those are a few of the tips that kind of come to mind if you're starting your healing journey, is awareness, seek help, resources, you know, and look at it as what's the lesson and the gifts that can be learned from it, right? And how you can then share that with even if it's just in your own community, your own family, your own children, you know, it can really be a purposeful gift.
That is so true, because when we speak about the things that make us shame,
Mhm.
then shame lose the power.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Abby. This was a very, very heartfelt interview and conversation that we actually had, and I hope it helps everybody.
Yes.
The link of Abby, so like that you can want to contact her and you need some help and some support, it is going to be in the description of this chat that we had. And please look for help if you need support, because we never know that we might have a problem, because if we are in this plane, we have something to work with ourselves. And there's coaches and healers for everything. For everything that you can imagine, there is help.
Yes.
Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Monica.
And this is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love. Thank you for being in Soul Talk.